to another episode of Cultivate and Keep, where we talk about what it means to be a man as a Christian. And today I have with me... You missed your cue, bro.
My bad. It's your favorite one, Jeremy, with your second favorite now, Nick Loudon. And your third
Loudon.
favorite, Corey.
Oh, third
Haynes.
favorite.
Why you
I'll
gotta
take
My
that.
bad,
us?
Corey. That's my bad.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Thanks for listening to us yet again. We're going to be talking about an interesting topic today. But before we get into that, I wanted to do a quick housekeeping item. We're still working on our /favorites page. If you don't know what that is, we're working on a single page where we have a whole list and directory of our favorite resources. They could be books or apps or websites, other podcasts. This can't be, we're not exclusive. Like, you don't just have to listen to Cultivate and Keep. There's other ones too. But if you have any suggestions, please email them to us, or you can find us on social media and give us a DM. But otherwise,
I want to say it's safe to say that we're always going to be working on that list.
Yeah, we're always
we'll
working on
never
it.
Complete that. I think every episode that's going to be in the announcement. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, for a while, because
For a
we're
while.
we're definitely building it out. It's at a really good place now, and Nick still hasn't looked at it, which is a shame. But
That's true. We're not lying.
But feel free to send it to our way, and that'll be a cool page for us to kind of have and resort to. Lots of good books on there,
Cool. Yeah.
lots of good stuff on there. So a lot of stuff that, well, I'm actually really surprised because I feel like as we started building it out, it was like, oh, like there's this really cool podcast, like Becoming Good Soil. And then I found
Shout
this
out
other
to
one.
Zach Hayes.
Shout out to
Zach Hayes,
Zach
if you're listening,
for the
shout out.
reference. Anyways, cool.
Hold on,
Okay.
that's like a real shout out because he actually listens.
That's
so
true.
He'll hear that and be like, "What's up?"
A real shout out to Zach
Yeah.
Hayes for the reference on our /favorite page. It's the Becoming Good Soil podcast.
You know,
Love those
another good
guys.
way to get a shout out is to become a supporter on the one and only Patreon.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop
Cool.
there.
That's it. That's your
Okay,
time
I
to
should
sell,
probably
bro.
Continue. I don't want to be too salesy.
Okay.
You know?
If you're interested in supporting and helping us in our mission, you can go to cultivateandkeep.com/support, and then it'll take you straight there.
Yeah, to Patreon.
Yep. I did some magic website redirecting wizardry just for you
Alright, Corey,
guys.
you're
So
Are we ready to
yeah,
rock?
take it, favorite.
Cool.
Intro us.
Dude, come on. I was just playing.
Okay.
All right, Nick, what are we talking about today?
You're
up,
on, man. What the heck? Okay.
He wasn't
fine.
ready.
No, I was not. I was just
He
listening,
wasn't
casually
ready.
listening. I felt like I
He
wasn't
was
even
tuning
part
in. Yeah.
of it. So we're talking today about being a provider.
Preach.
Fire.
Preach it. So we're talking about being a provider. I feel like this is a super relevant topic, just because all men are called to be a provider in one way or another. Most of us in many different ways. And I feel like it's also super relevant because Corey and I are both recently married. I was married about 7 months ago. I think 7 months today. Oh, yesterday. Dang it. Corey's correcting me
7
on when my
months. Wow.
Yesterday, Nicholas.
7 months, and
Yesterday.
Corey's was 8 months. That's why he
Yep.
beat me by a month. And Jeremy's like getting married soon, so
Yeah.
it's a super
Belabored.
relevant topic for us.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say was right off the bat, I think when most of us think of being a provider, you think like financially as a man, and like I think of like literally providing like a place to sleep and a house and food to eat. But in our notes, and one thing we kind of put down and have been talking through is just how being a provider is much more than like the physical essence of it. And so we'll get into that. But I just want to put that out there that if you are tempted to hit skip or go on to the next episode, don't, because we have some good content.
Yeah, we do.
You know how you like start talking, you don't know where it's gonna go.
I just don't start talking.
Happened.
Just don't start talking unless you know where it's
I
going.
just stopped. Like, guys, save me. No one did. So
No one did.
I just.
We were just there to watch and laugh. But anyways, I don't know. I think it's a super relevant topic because being a provider is sort of like it's very deeply rooted in who you're supposed to be as a man and your job as a man. And I think especially your job as a husband. And that was definitely one of the things that I was feeling when I got married 8 months ago was I have to take on this whole new identity and responsibility as a husband. And one of those primary things being a provider. And I was like, wow, like actually a lot rides on me now. Like it really is kind of, it's up to me, and I will gladly take that responsibility, but it's up to me to provide a place to sleep at night, and up to me to provide food on the table, and up to me to pay the bills, and up to me to make the bank account, go up and to the right and not down and in the negative. But it's a super relevant topic. And I think it's something that everyone experiences, obviously, but not something that not everyone talks about, and something that not everyone maybe talks about, kind of the struggles and the hardship of taking on that thing. Because I know that when I first became a husband, it was like sort of this shock of like, wow, like a lot rides on me, and like, this is scary. I don't know if you felt that way, but
Yeah, I think I did. It was more like, it's tough because you already started the job that you're in.
Yeah.
Kind of. So it was kind of like you just start to see like what you've like been preparing for like come to fruition, and it's like, oh wait, there's even more than I had anticipated.
Yeah, totally.
Like even financially, you're like, oh, if I make like this much, I'll be good, right? And even then it's like, but I should try to make more all the time, like, not to saying like, oh, just pursuing money is the best, but like just knowing like, okay, this is probably a good amount for me to like provide. And like, I feel like since getting married, it's like, but I should always be striving for like the next thing. But yeah.
Yeah, totally. Jeremy, what do you feel about being a provider?
Well, I was just thinking, it's like not being married yet. I can anticipate it, but like that's coming up pretty soon for me. So I'm starting to think through like, okay, I'm hearing you guys talk about like what kind of hit you and the struggles. So I'm like, like what's gonna hit me? Kind of like
the same thing.
I'm not like super like concerned or whatever like financially. I kind of never really have been. I've always kind of had the mindset of like it's gonna take care of itself. And I'm sure like when I get married, like I will have those moments of like, oh crap, like I need to make more money kind of thing. But I'm like more concerned of like the other side of it, like spiritually, emotionally.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I know that. Gotta be careful. But what I want to say is, I think men in general are less high maintenance than women are, and we can get by with, I would just say, less stuff and less. I mean, even like things like what's for dinner? Like I'm just gonna have a burrito. I'm fine. Like I don't need a healthy like
every
balance.
night.
Like right now being engaged with Connie, that's the point of like. Conflict that often is like she wants to eat healthy, and I'm like, what's cheapest and convenience?
Yeah.
All I care about.
Yeah.
And so like that comes up, or just like small things like we're getting ready, we're kind of prepping our home for being married, and so we're buying decorations and like the fancy sheets and all that kind of stuff.
I don't care.
Yeah, and I'm like, dude, like this is a lot of money. Like I don't care. Like so even like that area, like I think learning for me, like I'm going to have to learn quickly, like, what is important for her, and I need to be willing to provide in that way, whether it's, so more than just financially, but just, like, what does she like to do? Like, what's going to make her happy to decorate the home, or, like, eat good food, or, whatever it is, like, I have to provide that for her, and being willing to recognize what's important and then to do it. So that's what's going through my head right now.
You're just beginning. You're just starting.
Yeah, just little baby hatchling. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, though, because I remember when we got engaged, and we had a year. So we had a year-long engagement, and so basically what that meant to me was I had a year to save up for our wedding, and to be able to save up enough to be able to move out and start providing financially. And one of the solutions that I came up with was that a couple times a week, instead of going out and having kind of a normal dinner, I was going to go to the cheapest Mexican place I can go to.
His 99-cent bean and rice burrito.
Dude, $1.49.
Ooh, $1.49.
So,
is it Taco Bell?
I remember
dude, shout out to
Corey.
Roberto's in El Cajon, because I saved
He
so
took me
much
there,
money.
dude.
Yeah, dude, I did.
He was excited. He like called me up, like, dude, like
Bean and
rice
$1.40. Like
Yeah.
I remember that. It's funny.
But it's so funny, and so I did that, and it definitely worked very well. I saved a lot of money from not like going out and spending $10 on a meal instead of I was only spending $1.49.
Did you take Monique there with
Dude, you could have
No,
10 meals.
maybe a couple times.
you? A couple?
Maybe a couple, yeah.
That's funny.
She's down with a bean and rice burrito too.
But like that's a great example of like as a dude, like,
yeah, like you just
you
naturally
do what you
care,
gotta
yeah.
do, and
yeah,
you,
like
and
I'm
that
just
kind
gonna
of thing.
survive, and
Mhm.
like the bare minimum requirement. Like we can tend to be cavemen and not think about like
Your body.
your body, like the planning side of it, like what's good for me, what does my wife think, like how should I be thinking about this? And even then, like being a provider to me, like that was probably like the dumbest solution I can come up with. Like I had no
You could
idea. Yeah, I know.
You could
No,
make a quesadilla. It probably cost you like 5 cents.
Yeah, exactly. But even then, I can't cook, which is probably a flaw in my whole like being a provider as a husband. And Monique rags on me about that. I need to learn how to cook. I literally know nothing. That's a whole nother story.
I made dinner last night for Connie,
Wow.
and she gave me 8 out of 10.
I feel so
She's
bad. 8
being
out of
nice.
10.
But
That's high.
okay,
I was
let me
expecting
back
like a
up.
3.
So
What'd you make though?
I made breakfast for dinner because
It's a cop
come
out,
on.
dude.
What'd you make?
Listen,
Cheating.
that's literally all I can make.
Ooh.
It was bomb. I put like sausage in it and egg and like onions and peppers, salt and pepper. It was good.
Wait,
Salt and
what?
pepper
Salt
doesn't-
and- wait, what's the
doesn't
other one?
count as an ingredient.
So today, talking about being a provider, let's move on. Anyway.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
you need to segue us out of that because.
There's no coming back.
No, I had something I was gonna say for real about what you were saying earlier.
Okay, go for it.
So you were kind of talking about like the differences between like providing like financially and like how you were thinking like I'm more concerned about figuring out how to provide emotionally and however else. And to me they're all connected. Like you can provide in one way, and if you're not providing in the other, I feel like there's a couple like foundational things like providing like a, physical space and a money and like those types of things. Like that'll be totally diminished if you're not also providing emotionally. Like you have to kind of like they work together as one. So I mean, and this is kind of like in the context of marriage specifically, but there's other ways obviously to be a provider as like a young man. But
yeah.
I think those two things, like if you don't have one, you can't have the other. Like they work together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think when I say like not, I think financially providing, the way I think about it is like I'm not concerned because I feel like that's an easier fix. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's more practical ways that I could find a way to make more money if I have to. But I think really uncovering and learning how to provide on the other side of the spectrum of, emotionally, spiritually, I think that's harder to figure out. And I think for myself, I foresee that being like the bigger issue for me, of like really understanding the needs of my wife and, on that side of it. How do I figure that out and how do I do it,
Yeah. Well, even as we're talking, I'm realizing sort of how I think about it and the flaws of how I'm thinking about being a provider. And I think very like naturally by default, we think of being a provider as even solely being financially. And then, like if you're a man and you're providing financially, then you can like check the box and
Just
like
move on.
move on. Yeah. Like, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to, like nothing else is required of me. And it sort of goes back to that, like just taking the path of least resistance. Like I'm only going to do what's easiest. I'm only going to do what's required of me and if what's only required of me is to provide financially, then like that's all I'm going to do, and then that's all I'm going to do as a man. I'm only going to provide financially, and then you, like you said, you miss out on all the other aspects of like, oh, I need to provide spiritually, I need to provide emotionally, I need to provide and like be connected to people, but I didn't think about that kind of naturally. I only really thought about the financial aspect of it.
Have either of you guys read The Love Languages?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so this I feel like
interesting.
it like fits perfectly into that. Like these are the ways that you emotionally provide. So like, for example, Brittany's like acts of service, quality time. Those are some of her like bigger ones. So if I'm like kind of like you're saying, like if I'm like, okay, check's coming in the mail, we're great, like check the box, but I'm not like, we're not having, like sitting down and like talking with her about her day and like, hey, what's going on? Like, what's bothering you?
Why
Like,
did
how
your
are
voice change so much when you
you? Yeah, when I'm
talking about your day?
This is this is how I talk to Brittany. Or like spending the time when she's not around to like, do whatever as like an act of service. Like if I'm not speaking those languages, like that's me not emotionally providing for her. And like at that point she'll feel like it doesn't matter. I could bring in a check that's twice as big and she'll be like, well, but
Yeah, I
I'm
think it's
who
Life
is
would still suck.
I haven't seen you. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Jeremy, quiz. What's Connie's love languages?
Ooh, I'm on this.
Order all of them on like
In rank,
1 to
yeah.
5. Yeah.
Ooh. I only know the top 2, but I could probably figure them out. Well,
Okay.
it's the same as Brittany. So it's, I think first is quality time and then acts of service. And I think third was words of affirmation, but I highly disagree with that one. That's probably her.
You disagree with her
I think
love
that's
language?
probably her last one. I mean,
You
just
compliment her,
like,
she's like, be quiet.
and she says that. She knows. Like that's for sure not my third. So I think it's quality time, acts of service, I think physical touch, and then either gifts or affirmation, like
Yeah,
tied for
words of
last.
affirmation. Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up. So Monique's are quality time, physical touch, and then I think words of affirmation, acts of service, and gifts. And ours are in the exact same order, which has been really good for
Oh,
us.
yeah,
I know, it's
like-
That's cool.
Freaking set you up.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
perfect.
But it's also challenging too, because then when I'm not providing, like, then it hurts both of us.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
not just like one's missing out. It's like we're both missing out. But then when it's good, like when I am providing, or when she's also providing the quality time and physical touch or words of affirmation, whatever it is, then like it's great for both of us. And we both get to experience that together. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But well, in reverse, so what are your love languages?
Oh, thanks for asking. Words of affirmation is like, so we took the quiz because we're going back through the book with like a
should.
growth group, and my number one is words of affirmation, and
Interesting.
it's like on a 1 to 12 score scale or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's 12. 12 is like
Wow.
my next one, highest one is like 7.
Hmm.
So it's words
Wow.
of affirmation, physical touch, quality time, acts of service, and then gifts is
Dude,
last.
we're
Gifts I got like a 1.
We're the exact
Yeah.
same.
Oh,
Oh, it is true. I could see that between both of you.
hey Jeremy, I think you're really great.
Dude,
Speaking his language.
You're the best, man. You're the best.
Corey,
I like
what's Corey's again? Oh, quality time.
Quality time.
Well, we're already doing
We're
that. So
doing it right now, yeah. So easy enough. Physical touch, though.
I'm gonna stay over here.
Too. Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, those are great points. So okay. Oh yeah.
I wanted to make a point. That's cool. Before.
Oh yeah. Go on. Go for it.
It's not cool, dude. Affirm me. But okay, sorry, lost my point. You made a comment about having the same love languages. Kind of, it's good and bad, but it's bad in the sense that when you're let down, you're both let down. And I was kind of thinking about that. We put this in our notes, but the idea of, so for men, we know just as like women want to be cared for and provided for, like that's naturally in them. For us, it's in us that we as men like want to provide. Like that's just naturally in who we are. And when we don't do that, when we're not providing, Nick, you said this, like we're letting ourselves down and really our spouses down as well. And I think that begs the question. So if you find yourself in a position to where you're not providing, whether financially, spiritually, whatever it is, like what do you do about that? How do you address that with your wife? And like within your own heart, how do you work on that?
Are you asking me specifically?
I mean, just for conversation. So
yeah.
I don't think expect you to have the answer, but like let's talk
Right.
about that.
Well, like the book says in the Love Languages book, which I think is in the favorites page if you want to go check it out. But like it says, you need to speak the other person's love language, how they want to be loved, and not just how you want to be loved. So for us, like I said, it's a little easier because we both kind of speak the same quote language per se. But for example, if yours is words of affirmation and hers is quality time, then how you would naturally want to be loved and provide love is through like affirming her and, Connie, you're so pretty, or thanks for doing this, or you're so great at this, whatever it is. But really what you need to be doing is spending quality time with her and watching a movie or going out on a date. And so I think it's just like, one, recognizing how do I need to be providing for this other person and not just for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it goes back to two, like we as men, we could just eat our $1.49 burritos and pizza and Panda Express and then like sit on the couch and like be cavemen basically. But we need to think about how we can provide for other people too, and not just us, like not just checking the boxes.
Yeah, I feel like while you were talking about that, it made me think of like what is the foundation of like being a provider? Like to me, like as I was thinking about it, like there's no such thing as being a provider without other people and without a relationship, right? Like you can provide for yourself or for like a business or an organization or whatever, but really the foundation of all, like a man and his need to be a provider, all has to do with his relationship. So it could be a relationship with a spouse, with family members, with a friend, with a church community. And like being a good provider is understanding that specific relationship and knowing the best possible way to provide for that person. So like marriage, it's going to be a lot more in depth, right? You got like, okay, I need to, provide financially, emotionally. Like there's so many different things that you need to provide in, where it's going to be different depending on every single relationship. But I feel like that kind of ties back to what you're saying about like, just like being a provider is kind of like, it's just part of our identity and it's part of who we are, as men. And so like, it just learning to be a good one is understanding each relationship.
Yeah. And that brings me to one of the points I wanted to make, which was that I think, again, naturally, a lot of a man's identity can be wrapped up in his ability to provide. And while it is naturally, like God created men specifically to be providers and to be leaders and, to be kind of the breadwinners, quote unquote, and make the money. But also, like, if you're not making the money or you're not providing financially, then you might feel like a loss of identity or a loss of confidence just because you can't provide financially.
Right.
Even maybe if you could provide spiritually or emotionally, or I guess the point I'm trying to make is like a lot of a man's identity is wrapped up in his ability to provide, and that can be a good thing. Like, great, like everything's good, we're checking the boxes, but also like maybe if I'm not, then like I'm a failure, I'm no longer a man, I'm not a good person. But I mean, on the reverse side too, if you're rich, that doesn't necessarily make you like a great spiritual or emotional provider. Like you're still have other boxes to check.
Just like a personal example, I feel like, so it's kind of a funny like way of looking at it, but Brittany and I both work full time, but I work from home. So like I get to work from home. I still like work for like a organization and all that. Right. But because I work from home, it kind of like, sometimes it feels like, oh, okay, like my wife's going off to make the money, and like I'll walk her out to her car and I'm like wearing my sweatpants and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like looking around at like the other buildings and people are probably like, oh, this girl is like the breadwinner, whatever.
Like he's the loser boyfriend.
Yeah,
who, like,
exactly. I'm like, please don't. I swear, I'm like, have a good job. And so sometimes it kind of does like it's like a pride thing of like, I feel like I'm less valuable, even though like it's a full-time job and like it's a salary job and it's a great opportunity. But it definitely like, even something that like it actually doesn't manifest itself in any real way. Like it actually, the reality is that we're both working full-time and both make money, is like, it doesn't matter. It still feels a little bit and it like already hurts the pride, and that's just like shows how much men automatically have a need to like be that person. Were you going to say something? He's like, yeah. Okay, sweet, dude.
Well, to sum up that point, I think you could even just say like being a financial provider isn't a man's sole responsibility. It's just maybe the primary or the most urgent responsibility.
Yeah.
I think it's easy for most men. I mean, as we were talking about initially, when we thought of the idea of providing, I think we all thought financially. I mean, that's kind of the first thought. So I think as men, I think we focus the most, if not only, on like financially providing. And I think it's common to neglect the other sides that we need to provide. And we're talking about it right now, but I think a lot of men just don't even consider the other areas to provide. I think we have the mindset of, if my family's taken care of financially, if everyone has what they need, clothes on their back, food on the table, I'm doing my job. And I think we know it expands, much more beyond that.
Yeah, there's such a big contrast too between like a Christian marriage's idea of like, oh, I need to provide in all these ways, and like I'm assuming the non-Christian marriage that's probably like, I put food on the table, who cares? Like, and that's probably the response that a lot of men have. Yeah.
One thing I've been finding interesting is I've been meeting like a lot of people that aren't Christians that that's not, so the structure isn't like, the man provides. It's really that it's like a shared responsibility, if not a separate thing. Like a lot of my coworkers at my last job, they kept their money separate, the husband and wife, which I thought was super odd to me. Like I was shocked when I first like found that out, and I started to kind of like pay more attention, and I was realizing like more and more people that I know like are doing that. That are married. And I think that's so odd. Like it's separate money. And they talked about like, the guy was saying, yeah, like I need extra money. Got to buy my daughter a car. She's turned 16, whatever. Thinking to myself like, what about your wife, whatever? And like on Venmo, I see them like sending each other money for stuff. And I was like, what the heck?
That's
like
crazy.
This is weird. They're husband and wife, but it's like taken away. Like the world's taken away the idea of like the man being the sole, the primary provider, like you're saying.
Yeah. And I think some of that too is born of like a woman's fear of getting a divorce, and then the man being the sole provider. Like then she either doesn't get anything, or then like she doesn't like feel like she has any sort of, or even if they're not divorced, like she feels like maybe she doesn't have like any say in what they buy, or she doesn't feel like she's contributing. And then you end up separating your bank accounts and keeping all of your finances separate, and then it's robbing the man of his God-given responsibility to be a provider, which kind of just leads in like this snowball effect of the man like doing less and less and providing less and less. So maybe we can move on to I don't know. I think one of the things that I was thinking about was just the idea of roles, and we're talking about kind of the men and the women and providing, but like what are some of the other ways that we provide, like specifically, not just financially, but what are the other ways that we are supposed to provide, like tangibly, that are spiritual or emotional and in other ways?
I think the one that I probably forget about the easiest is this, like being a spiritual provider, spiritual leader. And I know that's kind of like something that we like had on our like notes or whatever, but in terms of like tangible ways of doing that, I think that like making it a point to pray together, and like the man will instigate that, like, hey, let's pray together, you know, whether it's just you and your wife, or it's you and your wife and you have kids, or whatever it might be. I feel like Brittany and I, we make it a point, we pray every night before we go to bed, and it's just like we didn't do that right away, and it was because it was just like busy like life, and we just like didn't think of it right. And it's on me because I didn't take that spiritual responsibility of I need to set the tone, and then being like, hey, we need to do this, and then starting to pray together like more often, and realizing this is so much better for our marriage. So I think that's one tangible way that maybe if you're out there and you're listening and you're like, I want to know how I can better spiritually lead in a marriage, that's a good way to start.
Yeah. I'll be the first to say, like, I need to do that. Like,
yeah, dude, come on.
No, really.
I'm just
like,
kidding.
Again, like it's so ingrained when you think about all the ways that you're supposed to provide, and you really just do think like, well, like the least I can do is provide financially, and if I don't do the other things,
Whatever.
at least I'm still like bringing in the check. But the reality is, you do need to actively be providing spiritually and emotionally in other ways.
Yeah, Nick, I'm glad you brought this up. I mean, because Corey, we've been talking about this, I think, recently about you've been sharing, like, you know, how do you lead Monique spiritually? And so it's got me thinking, like, soon entering into that season of being married, I wanted to know, like, ahead of time, like, how can I do that? So I'm glad you brought the example of, as like the man, like being the one to instigate it and to start it first. And so I think praying's good. Like, what else would you say? I was thinking, like, how about like devotions? How do you, as a man, like, how do you like lead that? You know, how do you, without being like I told you so kind of person, like what can you do to help your wife and you together like grow in that?
Yeah. I think, well, first of all, just like to affirm kind of what you guys were saying, like I feel like early on, like a month into our marriage, I was like, how do I do it? Like, wait, what am I?
Wait, what?
I haven't even like really figured out how to lead someone spiritually, and like someone that I'm married to, you know, like this.
Or like let alone yourself. Like,
yeah.
you don't have it figured out.
Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm like pretty good. Like, I got this, right? And then it's your responsibility to set the tone for another person. Like, maybe you led a small group once and like, okay, I get it. Like, people kind of look to you to be the leader, but like this person will look to you every day. And that was like, we met with like a married couple, and I was like, I'm like wondering how to do this. Like, can you guys help me? And so it started with praying, right? But you kind of asked about like devotions and stuff. For me, that's something that it's kind of been easy for me to do. Not like when I first became a Christian, but like developing my relationship with the Lord, it was pretty heavily tied to me reading my Bible specifically. A lot of people, like, you know, they'll go to camp and it's like a, you know, experience with God. And then from there, you're like, I'm a good Christian now. And like, that's pretty common, that's fine. But for me, it was like, I kind of found the Lord through consistently reading and like seeking him personally. And so with that, Brittany has said before, like, I can see how you treat devotions and how it's been so important for you, and like she really respects that. So that's a good starting point, is like, I mean, that her attitude really does decide like whether or not she can be led. So I mean, that's kind of like, it's not really on us, but like her being, you know, willing to follow the lead is also important, but then just being consistent in what I've already kind of like started to do. Like I still consistently, you know, do my devotions, and she sees that, and you know, she respects that and knows that, okay, like it's a motivating thing for her.
Yeah, I like that your response wasn't to like tell her what
Right.
to do. It's just do it, and then hope and know that she's gonna watch you do that, and then and like along with her attitude, like that's gonna help it. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So me and Jeremy have been talking about the idea of like leading by example.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, as a part of like the whole genesis of even this podcast of just kind of being thrown in the fire and like figuring it out as you go. And one of the things that I feel like has been revealed to me is you really do, like I say, you don't want to like tell someone here's what you do or like hold me accountable to this, but like I just need to start doing it, and then that reflects like who I am, and that like sets the example for what you're supposed to do, and like I said, sets the tone. But like even if you don't mind me digging into it, like when you do your devotions, like I mean, how does that reflect back to Brittany, and like how do you do like your devotions together, quote unquote?
Yeah, it depends. So we don't have like a consistent like, oh, we're gonna sit down and read together. We've had books that we've gone through together pretty consistently. So we read through, we've read through the love languages thing as part of that group. We've done Circle Maker, and we've also read I think most of Love and Respect, and I think another book too. So we've had like books that we read together, mostly about marriage and things like that. And so that has kind of like, we do that kind of consistently, like once a week, making sure that we're reading and we're like talking about, you know, whatever we're going through.
So you mean like you'll be together and like reading at the same time, and then like, hey, did you see what that part said? Or like
out loud.
Oh,
we read out loud. We'll even like go to like a
interesting.
coffee shop and like we'll read out loud.
Wow.
And just like sit across from the table or whatever. Most often it's just at home. Like we'll just, you know, sit down at, you know, 7 after dinner or something and just read.
That's cool.
Yeah, and like a lot of the books, like a lot of these books that we go through, they'll have like at the end like application questions. Like for example, the love languages one is like it asks you specific questions or gives you examples of how to perform that love language, and so it kind of like spells it out. And so we'll talk through those, and then it says like, what's an example of, you know, how you would do an act of service or whatever it might be. And so that's a little bit more of like a soft example of that, because it's not like like reading our Bible together, reading through a book of the Bible, you know, studying it. But I think that's like, I don't think that's a little bit more tougher ground to figure out how to do. Cause to me, I'm like, I feel like I have some knowledge, but I feel like I'm learning still a lot. You know, I'm like, This is God we're talking about. Like you don't just figure it out. And so I still feel like I'm not fully knowledgeable to be like, Brittany, let me teach you this, you know, like where I know that there's other marriages where the man is very like, he feels like he can almost like deliver a message to his wife, where I feel like I can encourage and I can support and I can guide, but I'm not like at the point where I'm teaching.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's where an area for me to grow in, but anyway.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I mean, that's super interesting. Just in this whole idea of like providing, and especially getting into the whole like spiritual side of it. I think if you kind of going back to a little bit of like the God-given responsibility, but 1 Timothy 5:8 says, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. And again, I think by default, we can think of that in terms of financially, but if you look at that verse in the context of financially and spiritually and emotionally, and then when it says he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever, like that really is very tangible. If you're not, like I feel the pressure of, if I'm not providing spiritually and I'm not helping my wife and cultivating like my family's faith, then like I'm failing. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely like a failure, even more so than financially.
Yeah, it's kind of tied to that. Like you're gonna provide, like as a man, you'll want to provide, and you're gonna do that in some ways. But if you don't prioritize where you're providing first and foremost, then it's gonna hurt you. It's like your marriage has to, you know, your relationship with God and your marriage are like, that's, if you do not provide and like really focus on those areas, the other ones will hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also has me thinking like, the idea of someone who's providing for others before their wife, so maybe just friends or other activities they're involved in, like giving those things a priority over the person that they're supposed to love first is I want to say a big no, which sounds funny, but
it's a no.
yeah, I don't know why it popped in my head. But I feel like for me, that's not being married yet, but that's an issue that we kind of will come to, me and Connie, is that I tend to overcommit myself to stuff and being really involved with a lot of things, that it's easy for stuff to take priority over my time with her. And that's like, that's a no. I shouldn't be doing that. And so I can imagine, hey, chill. But I can imagine, like, once we're married, how much that's going to increase and become more of an issue if I don't learn to do that now. So
yeah, I've said that. A lot of people are like, so how's married life? And I feel like sometimes I'm like, well, and I've said this multiple times, the hard stuff gets harder and the good stuff gets better.
Yeah.
Like that's just kind of how it is. It's
Yeah.
like,
That's so true.
just more of everything, kind of.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
Yeah.
like an example of what you're talking about. Like if you kind of see like, oh, there's this small problem, right, in like a relationship, like when you get married, it's just going to be like a magnifying glass.
Yeah. And one of my notes was like remembering that God is the ultimate provider. So like it's easy for us to think, well, I bring in the check, like it's on me, I'm the provider. But in all reality, everything that we have and that we own is all given by God, and that we're just kind of this vessel that God gives through us. But also if you keep going into that whole analogy, you can even get into how, we are we're the bride of Christ. And so, Jesus and God obviously is our spiritual leader and our spiritual provider. But also, like, if Christ is the provider for the church and we are the bride of the church, then like we are supposed to be the provider for our wives, just like that synonymous relationship, just like the marriage is supposed to be a representation of us in Christ. Like we need to be providing for our wives and our family.
Like it says, like he gave his life, up for her.
Yeah.
And like that's the ultimate form of provision, right?
Yeah.
Like us being willing to give up our entire lives for our spouse is like the ultimate way to provide for them.
Yeah. Maybe this is a little bit of a segue, but I heard an interesting statistic from, do you guys know PragerU? I think you do, right? Do you know PragerU?
No, I don't.
Okay, so Prager University, Dennis Prager. I actually don't, I think he was like a college professor or something.
I don't really know.
I don't really know.
I've heard of it.
Okay, it's a great website for all things life and especially politics. But they published this kind of this little infographic, but it says 3 simple rules to escape poverty. So this is in the context of providing financially. And it says 1, keep a full-time job, 2, graduate high school or equivalent, and 3, wait to have children until you're married and older than 21 years of age. And then it follows with these statistics, and it says Americans who followed all 3 of these rules, 75% joined the middle class or higher, and only 2% live in poverty. And then it says Americans who followed none of the rules, 7% joined the middle class or higher, and 76% live in poverty. And the reason why I mentioned that was because I think it was either your dad, Jeremy, or Chris George, but it was stuck with me. And he said, which one it was, he said, sometimes to be successful in life, all you have to do is avoid making the big mistakes. And it was just so clear to me, like, oh, like that's so true, because think about all like the big mistakes. Really, it's not like, oh, I don't make like enough money. It's always like I have so much debt, or like I had this car that I bought, or it's that I have like this bad relationship, or I have this divorce,
like
job or whatever.
Yeah, can't find a job, can't keep a job. I'm only working part-time. I'm working in this field that doesn't pay as much as it should. But really, to provide financially, sometimes all you have to do is just not make the big mistakes. And I feel like those 3 are especially true. Like, keep a full-time job, graduate from high school. Like, it's literally just get your education, and then wait to have children until you're married and older than 21. Like, those will set you up for success in so many different ways. And in a similar kind of analogy, there's probably a couple simple rules for providing providing spiritually and emotionally. Like, read and pray with your wife, do your devotions, like be involved in church.
Right? Yeah.
Like, speak your spouse's love language. and you just don't make the big mistakes.
And they're great predictors of success.
Yeah, and like you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be okay.
I'm pretty sure that was my dad. It sounds. I
I think it was your dad.
Yeah, it sounds like him.
Yeah.
That was my dad.
Shout out to
Steve-O.
Steven.
Steve.
All right, awesome. You guys have any concluding thoughts?
Well, I had a question I wrote down, and we've kind of talked about it, but just kind of like, how does this apply to the man that's not married? Like, how? I mean, obviously, yeah, I think about it and prepare, but like practically, like, what can be done now? I mean, especially if you're not like in like you're not engaged or dating anyone, just you're single. Like, how does this apply? What can be done at this point?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with preparation. So again, thinking in mind of like knowing what to expect first of all, and so knowing what to expect, and then second of all, just kind of learning by doing and kind of trial by fire. So put yourself in a situation where you're practicing those things that you need to do to be able to provide spiritually, financially, be able to provide for yourself and know your finances, but also know what your spouse's love language is when you have a significant other. Practice your devotions and praying and solidify that before you get into those situations.
Yeah, I would say the big one is looking at, not doing those big three, those mistakes, like making sure those big life mistakes aren't even close to being a part of your life. And then also like thinking like long about the future and what, is coming next. If you're like, what am I going to do for a career? Meet with business people, meet with different people, and, really seek advice on that. Maybe it's, I don't know who I'm going to marry. Seek counsel about things and let those kind of be like the start of you preparing to provide. So I would say that's a good.
Yeah, this might be dumb, but I thought of this example. When I was younger and I used to go to the dentist, if you're insured for a while and if your mouth's open, how it kind of like almost cramps up, like it would like almost get sore from like your mouth just being open. So I used to on the way when I drive over, I kept my mouth open. I'm not sure why, to like practice in a sense.
Endurance.
There's an idea of like I want to be prepared before I get there. That way, like I'm used to this feeling, and so I kind of like thought of that, like you might be single, you might not be close to getting married or being a provider, but start like practicing and preparing now so that you get used to that feeling. So when it comes, like you're prepared.
That's a great example.
Honestly, it was pretty good.
No, I'm serious. That was fantastic.
Great
Good job.
Okay.
All right.
I think we're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
Close this out.
Yeah, of course. I would love to. Well, Nick, thank you for hopping on this episode. Really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
You might come back
Thank you,
next
Nicholas.
time. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see how our listeners respond.
Get a huge spike in viewership.
Oh, Nick's on it.
Data don't lie, bro. Stats don't lie.
That's right.
Okay.
Anyway, all right. If you like this episode, you can give us not 5 but 6-star
6
review.
stars. But if you can't do 6, 5 is still good.
All right, yeah, we'll take what we can get.
Yeah.
You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can. That's kind of cool.
No. Just keep
accent.
going. Keep
Twitter.
rolling.
I'm struggling. You can send us an email with any questions you might have. What's the email?
Us at cultivateandkeep.com. There we go.
Corey, chill. He has his hand on like the stop button. It's making me nervous. All right.
It's painful.
Okay, I can lean back now.
Okay. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.